Imagine sailing for 3 years, crossing the Atlantic, surviving war, storms, and starvation. And then finally, arriving back at the place where you left your family, your daughter, your granddaughter, the people you promised you'd return to. Now imagine finding nothing. No people, no bodies, no note. Just an empty fort, overgrown with vines, and a single word carved into a wooden post. Croatoan. That is exactly what English explorer John White found in August of 1590 when he returned to Roanoke Island, a narrow strip of land off the coast of what is now North Carolina. 115 colonists gone, completely and utterly gone. It is the oldest unsolved disappearance in American history, and over 400 years later, we still don't have a definitive answer. Tonight, we're going to walk through everything we actually know, and everything that remains terrifyingly unclear. To understand what happened at Roanoke, you have to understand why anyone was there in the first place. It's the 1580s. England is hungry, the country is overcrowded, resources are stretched thin, and the Spanish Empire is dominating the Americas. Queen Elizabeth I needs a foothold in the New World, badly. Enter Sir Walter Raleigh. Ambitious, charming, and deeply connected to the Queen, Raleigh receives a royal charter in 1584 to establish an English colony in North America. He sends an exploratory expedition first. They come back with glowing reports about a place called Roanoke Island. Fertile land, friendly indigenous people, potential for real wealth. So in 1585, Raleigh sends the first group of colonists, about 100 men. Military types, mostly. It does not go well. Relations with the local Algonquian tribes deteriorate quickly. Food runs short. Conflict breaks out. By 1586, that first group abandons the settlement entirely and sails home with Sir Francis Drake, who happens to pass through at the right moment. But Raleigh doesn't give up. He sends a second attempt, a small maintenance crew of 15 men, to hold the fort until a larger colony could arrive. When the larger group eventually shows up, those 15 men are gone. Only a skeleton is found, not exactly encouraging. By all reasonable logic, a third attempt at Roanoke should never have happened. And yet, in 1587, 117 colonists set sail from England under the leadership of a man named John White. This time it was different. These weren't just soldiers or adventurers. These were families, men, women, and children. 17 women and 9 children made the crossing. Among them was John White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, who was pregnant. On August 18th, 1587, just weeks after landing, Eleanor gave birth to a baby girl. The child was named Virginia Dare. She was the first English child born in the Americas. It was supposed to be a symbol of hope, a new beginning. But things went sideways almost immediately. The colonists found the fort abandoned, the buildings damaged, and relations with the surrounding tribes tense after the violence of the first colony. Supplies were running critically low, so the colonists made a decision. They asked John White himself, their governor, to sail back to England and bring help. White resisted at first. He didn't want to leave his family, but the colony convinced him he was the only one with the connections to secure supplies quickly. So, in late 1587, John White boarded a ship and left his daughter, his newborn granddaughter Virginia, and 115 other colonists behind. He promised he would be back within months. It would be nearly 3 years before he set foot on Roanoke again. What kept John White away wasn't negligence. It was history. When he arrived back in England in late 1587, the country was in crisis. The Spanish Armada, the most powerful naval force in the world, was preparing to invade England. Queen Elizabeth declared that every available ship was needed for national defense. No vessels could be spared for a supply mission to a colony across the ocean. White tried everything. He managed to get 2 small ships released in 1588, but they were attacked by Spanish privateers and forced to turn back. He was stranded, desperate, unable to reach his family. It wasn't until 1590, a full 3 years after he'd left, that White finally secured passage back to Roanoke on a privateering expedition. The ships were primarily there to raid Spanish vessels, not run a rescue mission. But White didn't care. He just needed to get there. On August 18, 1590, Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday, John White's ship anchored off Roanoke Island. He saw smoke rising in the distance. He took that as a good sign. He called out. He had the crew play trumpets and sing familiar English songs, hoping to signal the colonists. No one answered. When they finally came ashore, they found the settlement completely abandoned. The buildings had been dismantled, not destroyed, dismantled. Someone had taken them apart deliberately. The heavy cannons had been moved and buried in the ground, and carved into a wooden post at the fort's entrance was a single word, Croatoan. Nearby on a tree were the letters CRO, as if someone had started carving and stopped midway. Here's what's important about that word, Croatoan. Before White left, he and the colonists had agreed on a code. If the colony had to relocate for any reason, they would carve their destination into a post. If they were in distress, they would add a Maltese cross above the carving. There was no cross. Croatoan, also spelled Croatoan, was the name of a nearby island, about 50 miles south of Roanoke, now known as Hatteras Island. It was also the name of a friendly Algonquian tribe who lived there, a tribe that had actually been cooperative and helpful to the English. White was hopeful. He believed the colonists had simply relocated. He wanted to sail immediately for Croatoan Island to find them. But the weather turned. Storms battered the ships. Water supplies ran critically low. The captain of the expedition refused to risk the vessels further. Against White's desperate protests, they turned around and sailed for the Caribbean, and then home. John White never returned to America. He never saw his daughter or his granddaughter again. He died sometime around 1593, the exact date unknown, still not knowing what happened to the people he'd left behind. In his own writings, which historians consider a verified primary source, White expressed grief and guilt about what he called his 5 years of discomforts in trying to return. He died without answers, and so did everyone else. So where did they go? Over 400 years, historians, archaeologists, and investigators have proposed several serious theories, and none of them has been proven beyond doubt. The most widely supported theory among modern researchers suggests the colonists integrated with the Croatoan tribe voluntarily. They were running low on supplies, possibly facing hostile pressure from other tribes, and the Croatoan people may have offered shelter and safety. One theory suggests the colonists split into smaller groups, with some heading to Croatoan Island and others moving further inland. This theory gained significant support when researchers at the First Colony Foundation, using historical maps and modern archaeological methods, discovered a hidden symbol beneath a patch on a 1585 map drawn by John White himself. The patch concealed what appeared to be a fort symbol about 50 miles inland from Roanoke, in a region where later settlers reported finding people with European features and knowledge of European customs among local tribes. That is considered a verified archaeological finding, though its interpretation is still debated. Another theory suggests the colony was attacked and destroyed, possibly by Spanish forces operating from Florida, who were documented as being hostile to English settlements in the region. According to some historians, Spanish records from the period reference searching for an English settlement in the area, though no record of a confirmed attack has ever been found. A third possibility, supported by some researchers, is that the colonists attempted to sail back to England on their own, using a small vessel they had been building and were lost at sea. And then there are darker theories, suggesting conflict with indigenous tribes that had been enemies of the English since the first colony. Some investigators point to accounts from the early 1600s, when English settlers at Jamestown reported hearing stories from indigenous people about colonists being killed further south. Captain John Smith of Jamestown fame reportedly took those rumors seriously, but no physical evidence has ever confirmed it. The honest answer is this: we don't know. We genuinely, definitively do not know. Archaeological work at and around Roanoke Island continues to this day. The First Colony Foundation has been conducting active digs for years, and as recently as the 2010s, researchers have uncovered fragments of early English pottery and other artifacts at sites consistent with colonial activity, including that inland location revealed by the hidden map symbol. The evidence is growing, slowly, piece by piece. But Virginia Dare remains a ghost, a child born on American soil, named after America, gone before she ever had a chance to grow up. Her story has become something of a legend. She's been referenced in literature, folklore, and pop culture for centuries. There's even a winery in North Carolina named after her. What strikes me most about this case isn't the mystery itself. It's John White sailing home in those last weeks of 1587, watching Roanoke disappear behind him, already worrying, already wishing he could turn back. And then 3 years of helplessness, 3 years of storms and wars and red tape, while his family waited on a remote island with dwindling supplies. And then that empty fort, those carved letters, the silence. Some historians believe the colonists survived, that they adapted, integrated, and lived out their lives among the people of this land. One theory suggests that survival was actually the most merciful outcome possible given what they were facing. I like that theory. I hope it's true. But here's the question I'll leave with you. If the colonists willingly went to Croatoan Island and integrated with the tribe, why didn't they leave a more detailed message? Why just the one word? Were they planning to come back and they never got the chance? Or did they simply run out of time? 400 years later, that carved word is still the only answer they ever gave us. So, what do you think happened to the Lost Colony of Roanoke? Drop your theory in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you want more stories like this, mysteries that history forgot, cold cases that never got solved, subscribe and hit the bell. New story drops every week. I'll see you next time.